Hey Sparkly Beans, it's Taurus season, and in this episode of Practical Astrology 101, I wanted to walk you through an example of how you can take a fundamental understanding of one of the zodiac signs and really apply it in your life. So we're going to be exploring Taurus energy in this video, and this is actually an example of how you can use some of the kinds of learnings that I'll be teaching in an upcoming live workshop. So if you're seeing this close to when I'm releasing it in 2023, I will be doing a workshop on Saturday, May 20th at 10 a.m. Pacific. That's 1 p.m. Eastern. You can convert to your time zone from there, obviously. That is called Ingredients of Astrology, Energies of the Signs. So this is really exciting. Ingredients of Astrology is going to be a series of workshops where we'll be digging in a really embodied, practical way, just like we do here in this series on YouTube, but going more into depth, as well as getting an opportunity to do some of this stuff interactively in a really neurodivergent friendly container as well. The first workshop on Energies of the Signs is going to be again on May 20th. It's a 2-hour live workshop, and you can find all the information about it below. I've got a link to the sign up page, or if you want more detail than what's provided there, then you can sign up for my email list, and I'm going to be sending out some more emails about what we're going to be doing in that workshop so that you can find out more. So if this video sparks your interest and you'd like to get into a more fundamental understanding of the 12 zodiac signs and really deepen your knowledge with natural metaphor, with an understanding in particularly of element and modality, then that's going to be the workshop for you. And I would love to see you there. It's accessibly priced. There's a sliding scale. We try to offer as many accessibility options in general as I can. But if you have any questions, just reach out to me and let me know, and I'd be happy to answer. And if you're seeing this after the workshop, no worries. You can sign up for my email list below to find out when I'll be doing other kinds of teaching as well. So let's jump into it. If you're brand new to this channel, I want to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Avery, and I help justice-aligned, neurodivergent, and nerdy humans to cultivate ease and self-trust for growing into our emerging future. This series, Practical Astrology 101, is all about how to practically apply astrology in a beginner-friendly way. And again, we're going to be talking about Taurus season. So let's go ahead and get started with just a quick overview of the element and modality for Taurus. This is the framework I'm going to be teaching in the workshop, and that I like to use as a starting point for any of the signs. Although there's more detail you can go into, there's more nuance you can go into from there, I think element and modality is a really good starting point. So with Taurus, what are we talking about? It's fixed earth. Modality is fixed, element is earth. So when we're talking about a fixed sign, these are going to be the signs that occur in the middle of the season. So that's one good way to kind of ground, to remind yourself of which signs are fixed, is they're the ones in the middle. So for Taurus in the northern hemisphere where I live, that's going to be spring. If you're in the southern hemisphere, that's going to be fall, and it's going to be right in the middle. So fixed energy is kind of, you can take from that it's the point of the season where there's not as much change, right? You're right in the middle. It's just very clearly it is spring or it is fall. You're right here. I was just outside, out back behind my house here in the Pacific Northwest, and we are very clearly in the middle of spring. Things are blooming. Animals are doing their thing. It's not necessarily that a fixed energy is static or unmoving. I don't think that's true at all, but it's more that it's steady, it's sustainable, it's, there's not as much variation, kind of like excitement or big change. Of course, with climate change, some of these references to, what is going on in the natural world have shifted, and frankly, there's not really any season where things, for example, where temperature doesn't flux wildly, but you can imagine that in an earlier time, this would be the part of the season where you would expect that, the temperature generally would be a little more steady in the middle of the season, that the level of light would be a little more steady, that things are, kind of solidly there. So that's a way you can remember that the middle month of the season is going to be your fixed modality. Further, what fixed really means is, again, it's sustainable, it's steady, it's reliable, it's an energy that doesn't have as much variance, that is kind of, going along at a steady hum. Often you think about reliability, consistency, but I think it's also important, and for me it's very important as somebody who's a neuroemergence guide and works with a lot of different neurotypes, that fixed doesn't necessarily have to mean that everything is exactly the same, boom, 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 all the time, right? So fixed could be the same sequence, the same cycle, the same, it can be consistent at one scale, even if it's like inconsistent at a smaller scale. So the same process, the same, whatever it is. Like, it doesn't have to be literally like this, but it might be, a fairly consistent, fairly similar sort of pace as you go, right? And then we're going to look at Earth. So fixed what? Fixed Earth. So Earth element. The Earth element is, we're going to think about foundations, of course. The Earth is what we stand on. It's gravity holds us down. We think about grounding in terms of energy. We think about, it's the densest, the heaviest element that anchors us to the earth that we live on, that grounds us down, is often how we think about Earth energetically. If you think about, go outside and experience the Earth element, think about things like structure. If you, imagine rock formations and the crystal structures within them, they're very regular, they're very ordered, they're very structured. Think about foundations, the way that rock or soil holds things up. It forms the foundation underneath. And think about the land more generally, and even the body. Think about the structures of the body, the skeleton system, for example, but also Earth is associated in general with the physical body, with things that are tangible, things that you touch, you can feel, you can sense, and you can think for yourself, like, what else do you associate with Earth? If you're thinking about the Earth element, think about rock, think about soil, think about the ground under your feet. What does that bring up for you? Everybody's going to be different. But traditionally, those are some of the associations with Earth. We think about physical resources. We think about labor, although I think it's also important. Sometimes Earth, we think about labor, we start thinking about money. I think it's important to have a very anti-capitalist perspective, to consider the difference between the natural resources that come from the earth, our relationship to those, to the food that we grow, that we eat, again, connected to our physical body. Think about shelter structures as well. When you get to money, you're kind of going at an extra level of remove, right? So you're not talking so much about the thing in the earth, you're talking about using something as currency to get to the thing. And so now we're starting to have abstractions there. When we think about physical labor, I think it feels very obvious to me anyway that, like, for example, agricultural labor, if you're, planting food for yourself, if you're cultivating food for yourself or your community, then that feels to me like a pretty unambiguous earth element thing. You're working with the land, you're resourcing the body tangibly. When you get to labor further and further out, it's not to say that it's not associated with earth at all, but when we think about sort of modern professions, not to downgrade labor, not to say that anything else isn't labor, but just to think about what is necessary and what isn't necessary, and how the oppressive institutions and structures and systems actually, like, divide us out and keep us from recognizing the natural abundance of the earth through the way that we relate to money. That's a topic that for me can come up somewhat with Taurus. When we think about, what is the connection between body, between land, between labor, between resources, between the food we eat, like all of these things, how do they relate to one another? So if we put fixed and we put earth together and we get to Taurus, some of the questions I might ask, that you might ask yourself for this Taurus season that might be interesting to kind of sit with and pause this video and to meditate on a little bit. What sustains, again, sustains being a keyword for fixed, what sustains and keeps constant your physical body? What sustains your ability to work, your ability to move your physical body, and your ability to do labor in order to get the resources you need? What sustains and keeps steady your access to resources? What sustains the land itself? What sustains the literal physical earth? What sustains what is needed to keep things growing? What is needed to keep our natural resources available and abundant to us? You can get that in a big picture sense, you can think of that in a smaller sense. But I like to think a lot about like what sustains that question, what sustains the tangible things, the earth type things, like our body, like our access to our basic needs, to food, to shelter. I think you can also ask yourself along the same lines. With Taurus, so you can ask what sustains. You can also ask in a sort of felt sense, what does it feel like to you to feel grounded, to feel a sense of being anchored? What is it that brings you that? And what is it that brings you that steadily? What keeps that steady and reliable? Or what doesn't? Where is your sense of that disrupted or diminished or hard to access? By the way, I'm in the Northern Hemisphere, so I think about spring with Taurus, but you can also think, of course, in the Southern Hemisphere, we're looking at Taurus being fall. And so you can think about, when we're thinking about like physical soil, right? I think about how the soil needs to be consistently, constantly nourished in order for things to grow. But one of the ways that happens is actually through things dying, through decomposition, right? Earth includes these processes of life and also death. And so in every Taurus season, we've got both sides happening. We've got spring, we've got fall, we've got new life and growth, and we've got composting, and we've got turning over, and we've got those energies as well. So depending on where you live, you might relate to one of those more with Taurus season. Thinking about how cycles are kept steady in that way. So those are some of the things that I like to think about. You can think about, what in your life feels like it has the energy of fixed earth. Where do you feel a sort of steady, reliable relationship to tangible things? Whether that might be in your body, it might be in your work, it might be in your access to resources. And then where don't you? And is this an area where you are longing for change? You can also think, Taurus is often associated with being stubborn. The glyph is the creature that kind of goes with it, is the bull. And a lot of times Taurus is associated with stubbornness in the sense that, it is a fixed energy, and a fixed energy doesn't like necessarily pivot or change all that easily. And so there's also that, like where the sort of shadow side of it is like, where are you clinging on to consistent access to resources, or maybe overemphasizing keeping the earth element steady So perhaps it's overemphasizing money in the bank over, let's say, access to your passions or relationships. So you can think about, are there areas where you might actually have an excess of fixed earth energy? Maybe you're afraid to leave your current environment or land you live on, even though there's a desire to do so, because it's hard to change, right? That might come up as well. And then, this is Practical Astrology 101. So when you're applying and you're thinking about Taurus and what you might think about, focus on maybe during this Taurus season, you can look at your own chart, of course. So you can pull up your natal chart. You can do that. Astro.com is one of the most common free resources to do so. There's lots of places to get your birth chart. And you can take a look and see where Taurus comes up in your chart. So you can see, what planets might you have in Taurus, if any. What house do you see, or houses depending on the system you're using, do you see where Taurus is in your chart? What is the planet that rules Taurus? It's a little more advanced concept, but useful. And kind of feel into that. If you have a lot of emphasis on Taurus in your chart, then this energy may be very familiar to you. And if you don't, it might be less familiar. So if I look at my own chart, I have Taurus. I use whole sign houses usually these days. And so I just am looking at the one house. So I'm looking at Taurus being 11th house for me, Cancer rising. And it's interesting to me, I think, to feel into the house and whether that area of life, the topic of the house, and the energy of the sign Taurus, how does that connect for you? So like one of the things that I've noticed is that it's not so much, so 11th house is like, includes things like your hopes and dreams, your visions for the future, and also the groups and organizations that you might pursue those things with. It includes like friends, but more in a kind of acquaintancy, like networks of people, groups who are like working towards the same things, who have similar visions, as opposed to like a really close friend. And, community might be another word for that. And so when I think about my 11th house, I don't necessarily think that I naturally have a fixed earth approach to the 11th house. In fact, I actually kind of struggle to stay present with a particular community or a social group. I wouldn't say that those earth-like qualities of structure or that I feel really grounded in community. In fact, I really don't. But if I kind of think of it a different way, what I notice is that having that fixed earth Taurus energy is something that it feels more like that energy for me. It comes in and is sustained and shows up in my life if I'm feeding my 11th house. So for me, it's kind of feels flipped a little bit, but it's if I am attending to being in community and having a broader network, right, then I feel more steady and I feel like I have more reliable access to resources. For me, if I isolate myself too much, and so this is a potential shadow of Taurus. A lot of times we talk about Taurus and it's the stereotype is loves expensive things, loves to shop. Well, I think that that's sort of true and sort of not true, because I think that if you think about fixed earth, you can see why the quality of something would matter, because quality things last. And so having access to tangible things and maybe spending a little more money on something that is really going to last and is purpose built and works for you and sustains your body and your health would totally make sense. But then when you think about hoarding wealth and you think about holding a bunch of money in the bank, that might be an kind of shadow application of Taurus, where it's well, it's not really resourcing you in a way that you need and that is useful. So can that go towards the community? So when I think about my 11th house, I'm like, oh yeah, you know, if I'm not paying attention to my 11th house, and I'm not attending to having a larger network, and I'm starting to isolate, and I'm sort of like feeling like my hopes and my dreams are not realistic, and I'm not like spending time on possibility and spending time connecting with people who have that same sense of possibility, then I'm actually more likely to feel a sense of lack and like not having that Taurus abundance, and feeling like, oh, everything is really like I can't control it, and it's not going to be, you know, I don't trust that I'll be able to sustain my health and sustain my well-being. And I don't trust that like we'll be able to sustain this like physical environment together because I'm so disconnected. But when I am more connected, I feel more Taurus. So that's like one way it shows up for me. Another thing you can look at if you're a little more advanced, you know how to do this, is you can look to the ruling planet for that house, and that might give you a little more information. So the ruling planet of Taurus is Venus. So it's fairly simple. I just told you that it's Venus. So you just find Venus in your chart, right? And see what sign and house Venus is in. And that gives you a sense, at least this is how, this is the kind of the Hellenistic astrology way of doing it. But if you look to where Venus is in your chart, you can get a sense of where are the resources for that area of life actually coming from. And that might give you a sense of why you do or don't relate to that sign. So in my case, I have Venus in the 10th house in Aries, trying to resource this like Taurian 11th. And I can see why that would be a little bit of a challenge, right? Because Aries is a very different energy. And so, you know, Venus is saying like, Venus in a traditional sense can't see Taurus. When two signs are next to each other, they can't see each other. And so, you know, it can't really see what's going on there. It's like throw in resources, but it's very Aries. It's like, here you go, have a little. And it's like, you know, I feel this very much in my 11th house of like, get excited about something and then like fizzle out, right? And so it's kind of hard to feed and resource a fixed earth area from a cardinal fire area. It just like doesn't really go that well together. And so that gives me like a little bit of understanding and a little bit of grace for myself, and understanding why that might be difficult, and then thinking about what that might look like and getting creative about, you know, how I might approach that and how I might see things differently, and kind of let go of like one understanding of the way things are quote unquote supposed to look, by understanding like I don't have placements in Taurus. It's also ruled by, well, I don't have planets in Taurus. I have the North Node in Taurus, and the North Node is often an energy that is not that comfortable and that you're kind of going towards your whole life, but like it's challenging. It's not natural to you. And then also it's ruled in this kind of awkward scenario. So I can see that that's actually an area of my life that might require some active attention and some thinking about how would I nourish it and how do I develop this. And it might look different than it would for somebody who, say, is a Taurus sun or Taurus moon, or has, you know, a relationship, or has Taurus maybe ruled from, has Venus in Taurus, or has Venus somewhere where it can see Taurus, or somewhere where the resources kind of match up in a natural sort of a way. Would feel very different, I think. So you can look at your own chart to kind of analyze and evaluate that as well. So I think that'll about wrap us up for a little exploration of Taurus. If you have questions about this sign, about what I talked about, what would and wouldn't apply, you can leave them below. Let me know. Do you have Taurus placements? Where are they? How does this relate to you? You know, does the fixed earth quality, do you feel it in the house where you, or houses where you have Taurus? Or does it take a little finagling like I just did in that example with my own chart to kind of get there? Or do you need a little help figuring that out? I'm happy to give some advice in the comments. And if you're interested in this, again, if you're seeing this before May 20th, you should definitely sign up for the workshop. Link is down in the description. I'm really excited to be doing this 2-hour live workshop. And if you can't make it live, you still can sign up and get the recording, but you do need to sign up in advance. And we're going to be digging into element and modality in a more systematic way across all 12 signs. So you learn about the 3 modalities, the 4 elements, how they mix together, and we'll be grounding that in sort of natural metaphors and understanding so that it'll stick in your mind a little easier than kind of random little qualities about the signs that you learn about, from memes around the internet necessarily do. So I found this way of learning to work really well for my own neurodivergent brain, and I hope that it will work for you as well. So I would love to see you on the 20th. And of course, you can sign up for newsletter below to see when there are new videos coming out in this series and in general on the channel, as well as blog posts and other offerings like this workshop. All right, have a great rest of your Taurus season. We'll see you next time.